Americans have always trusted in their government to defend them from undisclosed threats, domestic and abroad. One of the most renowned secretive agencies charged with this responsibility is the Central Intelligence Agency. Yet their efforts to protect national security ultimately have harmed the personal liberty of citizens around the world, as well as severely tarnished Americans' precepts of fairness and morality. As the United States emerged from World War II as one of the world's superpowers, it was essential to American safety that there was a group of people willing to spread democratic values across the globe. It was in the U.S.'s best interest to create an organization dedicated to identifying foreign threats as well as collecting information to maintain democracy as the primary form of government, hence the formation of the Central Intelligence Agency. It was established in 1947 by President Harry Truman when he signed the National Security Act in an effort to combat the spread of communism in Europe. The Soviet Union, who was at the forefront of the communist campaign, was the antithesis of everything that the United States was built upon: ruthless tyranny, murdering of oppositional forces, and repression of the press. They aimed to spread their communist influence to vulnerable countries decimated from the war. However, the CIA gathered foreign intelligence. They also executed regime changes, propaganda, and undemocratic values, which has defamed the U.S.
Guatemala, an economically challenged country, turned to a more left-leaning nationalistic-style government as it emerged from the 1944 revolution, ridding their dictator Jorge Ubico. Jacobo Arbenz emerged as the Guatemalan president, with communists controlling his political sphere. As Guatemala began nationalizing more of their industries, it negatively affected the U.S. economy. Their government began to treat U.S. companies as lesser than, especially the United Fruit Company, which increased tensions in their diplomatic relations, as well as created a personal vendetta for the U.S. to pursue. Additionally, Guatemala's proximity to the United States propelled the U.S. to view them as a pending threat to them as well as the rest of the democratic hemisphere. It was feared that countries surrounding Guatemala would be susceptible to their newly founded ideals, and the U.S. would lose control of the Western Hemisphere. The only solution was to exterminate the Guatemala government, no matter the cost. When the new government crumbled, the U.S. installed a new, more democratic government that they would now have control over. This new form of government regressed Guatemalan social progress back to the status quo of the colonial era. As a result of American intervention, a civil war arose due to the enraged Guatemalan citizens for having their lives uprooted and destroyed. Guatemala's economic progress had stagnated, and the political sphere was ultimately dominated by the corrupt titans of industry. Yet, the war took an ugly turn as the army too was corrupted. The army tortured, raped, and executed hundreds of Guatemalan citizens and abused their people's human rights. Guatemala was so desperate to rid their country of American influence, they massacred their people to try and achieve this. Consequently, the unjust actions of the United States government and their orders to the CIA resulted in the neglect and abuse of the human rights of the Guatemalan people. These illegal, covert American-sanctioned interventions destabilized Guatemala for decades, if not still.
In like manner, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida, a Guatemalan-style rebel government was forming in Cuba through the revolutionary tactics of Fidel Castro. He quickly obtained totalitarian rule over the Cuban people with a communist fist. While many accepted Castro as a leader, thousands fled to the United States seeking refuge from his oppressive regime. The CIA viewed these incoming refugees as an opportunity to extinguish Castro's power once and for all, as assassination attempts, propaganda, and quasi-libertarian talk of fake news all failed. Additionally, in May of 1960, Cuba would establish diplomatic relations with the USSR as a result of the American invasion on their soil. Cuba felt weak, unprotected against such a large world power, and turned to the U.S.'s enemy for strength. This heightened tensions between the two countries, as they were now on the opposite sides of the ideological spectrum. In return for their protection, the Soviet Union sought to put ballistic missiles in Cuba, pointed directly at American heads. In response, one of Cuba's main trading partners, the U.S., had put sanctions on their sugar imports, knowing it would devastate the Cuban economy. Ultimately, the CIA's negligence led to widespread distress and paranoia in every American household, which created a sphere of limited personal liberty. The federal government utilized the distressment of these displaced persons for their own economic and political gain. They were going to use these people as soldiers to overthrow Castro's government. Little did these unfortunate souls know that the government they trusted with their safety was going to send them to their death. This operation, known as the Bay of Pigs invasion, was one of the most disastrous and poorly executed missions the United States has ever carried out. Because of poor planning and improper intelligence, the hastiness and carelessness of the CIA, the Cuban refugees simply became collateral damage in an attempted rebellion. The arrogance of the JFK secret ops group, the Bay of Pigs sham, and public relations nightmare have elevated Khrushchev as the Cuban hero.
Furthermore, throughout the CIA's history, it is no secret that they have utilized unethical methods to obtain information from suspects about their enemies. In countries all over the world, CIA operatives have captured their citizens and violated the human rights to gain intelligence. A common practice of these torture methods is waterboarding, which is the process of suffocation by water involving the strapping of an individual to a tilted board with their legs above their head, placing a cloth over their face, covering their nose and mouth. Water is then poured continuously over the cloth to prevent breathing, simulate drowning, and induce pain. The extent in which the CIA is willing to go in order to obtain potentially invalid information is alarming. These operatives demonstrate their lack of respect for human rights and are not afraid to infringe upon an individual's rights to obtain ethical treatment during the interrogation process. Other forms of torture include rectal feeding, confinement in a box, beatings, and sleep deprivation. Moral grounds are no longer a concern in the mind of the CIA as long as they get the information that they need. It is evident that they are tarnishing the American reputation by treating foreign personnel so disgustingly and not affording them the same conduct that would typically be exercised in an interrogation of an American citizen. The CIA's brutality has been widely spread to many individuals across the globe suspected of crime. One case involved Abu Zubaydah, who was captured in 2002 outside of Pakistan due to suspicion that he was connected to the September 11 attacks. While there was substantial evidence to convict him, the CIA kept him in custody for 14 years. In this time, Zubaydah fell victim to the barbaric tactics practiced by the CIA. U.S. records show he was waterboarded at least 83 times, the last session administered at the insistence of the CIA headquarters, even though interrogators on the ground had judged him compliant. The CIA abused their investigation abilities to use this man as a metaphorical punching bag and unleash their bottled-up anger about the recent terror attacks on a single man. Although he was associated with these attacks, Zubaydah was obedient and cooperative with the CIA, which destroys any moral justification for the violence bestowed upon him. Sleep deprivation, being kept nude, and confined in a coffin were all techniques used to abuse a suspected criminal, yet he is innocent until proven guilty. At these moments, Americans in charge of these interrogations slip into the same bestiality that they have previously condemned other countries for doing so.
Citizens abroad are not the only ones subjected to the wrath of the CIA, but natives of this soil are as well. This was all credited to the Patriot Act, which was instituted after the September 11th attacks. It expanded the CIA's power immensely by allowing them to infringe upon a citizen's First and Fourth Amendment rights. The result is unchecked government power to rifle through individuals' financial records, medical histories, internet usage, bookstore purchases, library usage, travel patterns, or any other activity that leaves a record. Unprecedented methods of obtaining evidence is as much of a human rights violation as enhanced interrogation methods such as waterboarding. A notice when obtaining a warrant is a crucial check on the government's power due to the fact that it forces law enforcement to operate in public, while also allowing the individual to enjoy their Fourth Amendment rights. Essentially, in an effort to protect American citizens, the government and its agencies have overextended their authority and have peered into the private lives of constitutionally protected citizens.
The CIA has pushed the federal government to bend its own laws as well, in terms of the funding for their covert missions and unethical interrogation techniques. In 2013, Edward Snowden, a former NSA employee, had leaked to the Washington Post that the CIA and other government intelligence agencies have used a secret budget to fund their operations. The Washington Post states, although the government has annually released its overall level of intelligence spending since 2007, it has not divulged how it uses the money or how it performs against the goals set by the President and Congress. The CIA and federal government have been deceiving the American people as to where their hard-earned taxpayer dollars were going, as well as the plethora of assassinations and enhanced interrogations that they have been funding. Transparency is one of the most important factors in a cohesive democracy. Yet, in this day and age, the American people forcefully remain oblivious, and transparency is a core value government budgeting. Developing a transparent budget process will improve the government's credibility and earn trust within the community. A democracy is founded on the principles of trustworthiness to uphold the voice of the people and hear them. Purposefully neglecting to tell the citizens what they are indirectly funding is equivalent to stealing their money. Deceit has become the mantra of the CIA, and it is turning neighbor against neighbor and filling the country with ambiguity.
The CIA gave a valiant effort in protecting national security, yet their extensive training did not cover morality and the human rights that citizens are entitled to no matter the country. These operatives and the agency as a whole have created an immoral and barbaric character for themselves, as well as the United States of America. They have put the personal liberty of citizens around the world in question, as well as severely damaged the American moral high ground that it has prided itself on since the very formation of this country. As despicable as whistleblowers like Manning, Snowden, and Assange are, they are for the most part the agents of change, as they have exposed the documents that reveal the depth of depravity of the torture techniques and the Patriot Act insinuations into our emails, cell phones, and water cooler gossip. Balancing the needs for state secrets and national security against the rights of its citizens should be a paramount concern of any federal agency, especially a persistently degraded agency like the CIA.